and 20, Micah 4, they all teach the same thing concerning mountain. So here we have two churches. The first one, it says Hagar is Mount Sinai. So we know that Hagar is a reference to the Old Testament church, the church of the Old Covenant, which is why Paul here also says which things are an allegory. For these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar, and then the next one he says is now, which is Sarah. So we have the church of the Old Testament being Hagar, and the children of the Old Testament then would be Ishmael, right? So then later on you have Isaac, or I should say you have Sarah, the other woman, which would be the New Testament church, and Isaac would be the children of the New Testament, which is why Paul here says in verse 28 of Galatians 4, now we, brethren, children of the New Testament church, as Isaac was, are the children of the promise. But as then, he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, even so it is now. Which is exactly what you see. You see those born after the flesh, those holding on to the Old Testament church, after the New Testament church had been born, persecuted Isaac, those born after the Spirit. So we have here a clear depiction in Galatians of what this means. So if Paul is saying that that story is an allegory, I know many people today would say, oh, you can't just go into the Old Testament and find a story and say that it should be repeated and it's symbolic. You know, people call that reading into things, right? But here, Paul, by the inspiration of God, directed by the Lord himself, is writing these things as truth. It's not reading too much into it. Paul himself, according to the Lord himself, is saying that these things are an allegory. And so we know if Abraham is part of the picture, if Sarah, Hagar, Ishmael, Isaac are all symbols, then Jacob must also be a symbol, as well as Esau. Now this is something that is not actually surprising, especially as Seventh-day Adventists. We speak of something called the time of Jacob's trouble, which we can read about in Jeremiah 30. And in Jeremiah, I'll just read the verse, Jeremiah 30, verse 7, which it talks about Jacob all over the Bible, prophesying future from these prophets. Now Jeremiah, he says, Jeremiah 30, verse 7, alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. Who shall be saved out of it? Jacob shall. So here we're being told Jacob will be saved out of a time of trouble, which was future of Jeremiah's day, and in the context of the chapter, it's still future of our day. And definitely future of Jacob's day. Jacob died years and years, hundreds of years, before Jeremiah ever came on the scene. So here we see that Jacob is being used as a symbol. Likewise with Esau, he is also used as a symbol in these prophecies, which we'll get to in a bit. But first let's go back to Genesis 25. But yeah, we will see that Esau is also prophesied in the prophecies that we call major and minor prophets. However, that term probably isn't the most accurate depiction of the prophets of the Lord, because all the prophets of the Lord are major prophets. The minor prophets, the ones that we don't really need to worry about, those are false prophets. The Lord says you should not fear them, Deuteronomy 18. But here we're going to look at a few more things to get a better picture of what this is speaking of in Genesis 25. So what we did cover in Genesis is that there's a lesson. Okay, because it says, remember Genesis 25 verse 23 says these two people represent two manner of people. In Galatians 4, we learned that the previous people of their family represented a depiction of the Old Testament church as well as the New Testament church. Now, since Isaac and Esau Jacob and Esau are the children of Isaac, we know that it must come around after, sometime during the New Testament period, because Isaac must already be on the scene. As well, according to verse 26 of Genesis 25, Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah bare her children. So we know that this is a picture of something close to the end of time, because it's when Isaac is old, or when the children of the New Testament are in their latter years, just like Isaac was. Also, we know that this is them struggling in their womb, about to be delivered. And this is the time when we as a people are about to be delivered. Now, our deliverance is not necessarily what we typically think of as Seventh-day Adventists, but we can get into that another time. Now, here we see in Genesis 25 the story of Jacob and Esau, and it's a depiction of God's people, two manner of people in the latter days. So, and more reasons why we know this as well. Back to Jeremiah 30, there's to be a time of Jacob's trouble, which must be that there must be, or must mean that there must be Jacob. So, we know that this is two classes of people, sometime future. Now, we have many indications showing us specifically what these two classes of people are like and where they are to be found. Now, notice that both Jacob and Esau come from the same mother, and we just found out that a woman represents a church. So there must be another church to come sometime during the Christian era with two classes of people in the church just before the church is delivered. So what church could that possibly be is a question that we all need to ask. Now, since we as Seventh-day Adventists believe that we're the last church, the church that is to be delivered, we must be the people that are depicted by the church of the mother of Jacob and Esau, or we could say Rebekah. Alright, so we have Rebekah being a symbol for a church, and she has children, or the membership of her church. And these members are two manner of people. Now, we can read about these manner of people as well in Romans 9. We'll just read another passage here. Perhaps we won't read the full thing. I want you to go and read on your own time if you can. Read Romans 9, verse 7 through 14. But a few things that it says here, it says that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So we know that Isaac, which we just found in Galatians, is the children of the New Testament. In Isaac shall thy seed be called. And it also says that Sarah shall have a son, which we already learned about. And I'll read verse 11 here in Romans 9. For the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. It was said unto her, the elder, and unto her it's speaking of Rebekah, the elder shall serve the younger, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid. So here we're told that these two classes of people, clearly, one is righteous and one is wicked. One is saved and one is not. One God loves, one God hates. That's what we're told here in Romans 9. So these two classes of people, it's something that we see over and over again as depicted to be God's church just before he delivers his people. And a few references that you can go to for that. Testimonies to Ministers, page 46. It says there are two opposing influences continually exerted on the members of the church. One influence is working for the purification of the church, and the other for the corrupting of the people of God. So we have these two classes of people in the church. And Sister White here is speaking specifically of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so one is working for the purification, and the other is working for the corrupting of God's people. So we know that we want to be the ones working for the purification of God's church. And we will find out, anyone can find out by simply praying to the Lord and reading His Word and investigating something that comes claiming to be from the Lord. If you're honestly seeking the Lord, you will find out clearly what this purification is that is being spoken of. We also have the parable of the wheat and the tares, the parable of the good fish and the bad fish, he that had his garment on, he that didn't. We have the sheep and the goats. We have many, many parables of Christ and many stories in the Bible depicting two classes of people. We also have Cain and Abel, two classes of worshipers. Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau. It's over and over again. We have two classes. And something that we want to take note of in Genesis 25:26, it says, "And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel." Okay, so Jacob came out after Esau. There's the firstborn, and there's the secondborn. And this is something very significant throughout all the Bible, because we always have the firstborn, and then later on, the secondborn ends up replacing him. Okay, so we're going to see specifically what this is. But to be clear, and there's more proof for this, which could be sent upon request, but hopefully we've covered it clear enough for now. These two classes of people, two manner of people represented, one by Jacob and one by Esau, represent two classes of people within the Seventh-day Adventist denomination. Alright? Esau clearly would represent the firstborn, because Esau was the firstborn. And we'll see clearly what the firstborn means. But we're going to look at here what that means in Exodus 22:29. And this is showing us what the firstborn is about. There's many places in the Bible. If you have a Bible search engine, please type in firstborn, and you'll see that firstborn is a concept that is mentioned on and on throughout the Bible. So Exodus 22:29 says, "Thou shalt not delay to offer the first of thy ripe fruits and of thy liquors. The firstborn of thy sons shalt thou give unto me." So the firstborn were to be given to God as the priesthood. And a quick way to see that it's to be for priesthood is actually in Numbers 3:45. You see something happening, which is significant. It says, "Take the Levites instead of all the firstborn among the children of Israel, and the cattle and the Levites instead of their cattle of the Levites instead of their cattle. And the Levites shall be mine. I am the Lord." So we're told here that the Levites, or the priesthood of Israel, they were the second priesthood. They replaced the firstborn. So here we have the firstborn being the natural-born leaders, the leadership of the church. And they are the one with the natural-born talents. They're the ones that God first appoints to be leaders or priests of his people. So we're going to look at a few of these symbols that connected with Esau. Okay, Esau has a name. Esau came out red and all hairy. Well, it's very strange to have twins where one is red and hairy and the other is smooth. Doesn't say he's hairy, and it doesn't give his color either. So why is it depicting them, though, as very opposite from each other? What symbol or what meaning does this have for us today? So first we're going to look at, according to verse 25 of Genesis 25, we're going to look at hair, okay? What the symbol of hair is. And there's many examples of this all throughout the Bible of what hair represents. Okay, we have Nazareth.